Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you saw that there was this incident not too long ago in which Professor Ersula Ore at Arizona State University had a really nasty run-in with the police. An officer by the name of Stuart Farron, who's a young guy, about 25 years old, decided that somehow he felt compelled to slam her to the ground and really do some things that a lot of people felt amounted to an unjustified use of force. And I talked to this man about this issue before. Mr. Ken Williams is on the line with us today, and I wanted to bring him back to kind of finish the discussion. So first, I want to ask Ken, how you doing today, brother?
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for having me today.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. So, okay. So you're a former police officer. You were a detective with the Brockton Police Department in Massachusetts. You're a 20-year veteran of the force, but you've also been outspoken about police misconduct. And you reached out to me because this case was a concern for you. That there were some things that kind of happened that really bothered you. Since the officer has resigned, effectively. Uh, what's on your mind right now? What is it about the case that still kind of bothers you?
Certainly. I mean, I think one of the things that I wanted to go and clarify for, going over some of the comments when we did our first interview regarding Professor Orr's arrest. There's some people that felt or commented that when an officer approaches you, you're a pedestrian. Officer approaches you, demands your ID. You're supposed to produce an ID because that's supposedly a lawful order. And the report that came out from Professor Orr's arrest, that was issued from Arizona State University, where they did their independent investigation, confirms, and it's common throughout the land, an officer does not have the right to have you produce an ID on demand if you're a pedestrian, or you're a bicyclist, or you're a jogger, or you're a swimmer at a beach. Um, the only time that the officer, under those circumstances, um, can verify who you are is by asking for you to produce your name to him or her, and then they can check if they need to in a database to go and figure out confirming if that is who you are. And there was this whole blogger fear that went on after we did our interview, which concerned me because, unfortunately, in back of a lot of the things that we discuss in public, there are other officers that are out there that may take, Officer Farron's situation and believe that they have a lawful command that they can issue to somebody to produce an ID in those situations, when in fact that is false. Professor Orr's arrest, as we discussed in our first interview, is a false arrest. The report that is issued by Arizona State University clarifies that Officer Farron made some very technical errors in his judgment, that he ordered her to produce an ID when she didn't have to, that she was walking in a road that had obstruction at the end of the road where many folks walked in the same pattern as she did, where she was not jaywalking. So this concerned me. I'm concerned because you have a professor that pled guilty to a false arrest. Now, what is the school going to do to hold Officer Farron accountable? And what is the DA going to do to hold Officer Farron accountable for these misrepresentations in his report, which sullied the name of Professor Orr?
Interesting. Well, it looks like the officer was pretty upset when he resigned recently. It looks like he's basically saying that he's tired of the politics. I'll quote him. He says the lack of support, cooperation, and downright bias, coupled with an agenda to ruin my career, has become unbearable, and I will not subject my family to this any longer. He said in a statement in a resignation letter. So he feels apparently like he's been made into the victim, but really, if you look at what's kind of happened here, the chief of police for Arizona State University, Michael Thompson, he wrote in a letter that basically said that the officer's rigid, power-based approach to law enforcement and unwillingness to exercise discretion and sound judgment culminated in you arresting Dr. Orr without lawful bias. In doing so, your actions brought discredit to yourself and ASU PD, which I certainly agree with. I mean, we can all agree that she wasn't a threat to anybody. She wasn't hurting anybody. She wasn't doing anything illegal. I think that your additional points are valid as well. That number one, I think most people didn't know that an officer can't just ask you for your ID just because you're standing there. I always thought that they could. So let me ask you this. So if I'm at the beach and a cop walks up and says, "Can I see your ID?" What do I say to him?
Yeah, you explain to the officer that for an ID issue, for an ID to trigger, for an officer to walk up to you and say, "Hey, I need to see your ID," that falls under the Terry stop rule. And Terry says that you're in the commission of a crime, or that there was a crime that occurred and you're a suspect in that crime, or officers are preventing a crime in the future. So under those conditions, if it's a Terry stop, the officer can compel you for you to produce your ID, but he has to follow that up with, if you don't produce your ID, I'm going to arrest you, or you could be subject to arrest for failure to produce your ID. In the case of Ms. Orr, the officer in his investigation by the ASU, which was an independent investigator that came in to question him regarding his thought process and why he felt he needed to arrest Professor Orr, they asked him a very pointed question. They said, I guess my question about that, though, is that here, you're saying that you're going to arrest her for failing to provide ID when that wouldn't be a good arrest, would it? This question's being posed to Officer Farron. His response is, if to arrest her for failing to provide ID, no, that would not be that would be a non-legal arrest. That is correct. So Officer Farron is even saying in his interview, he agrees he falsely arrested Professor Orr because he had no right to ask her for an ID. He didn't even have a right under a Terry stop to really order her to produce her name and all this other information because she wasn't committing a crime that warrants that type of interaction with a public citizen. It's just really crazy what this guy did. But I'm extremely concerned because if he's in his statements, in his investigative report, answering in the affirmative that he did not have legal rights to arrest Professor Orr, that means that his report, he is now saying in his four corners of his report that he submitted to the DA's office, he submitted a false report, a false government document to the prosecutor's office to falsely prosecute Professor Orr. He should be charged.
So you're saying that maybe by resigning, maybe he thinks he can get away with just walking away from the job and not dealing with the consequences of his actions. That he might have actually broken the law. It's interesting when I'm looking at this guy's background. Just for the sake of full knowledge, there was another professor that filed a complaint against him as well. And there was actually a supervisor who told him, you don't have to throw the book at everybody. He was writing tickets and he wanted to write tickets for everybody. And they said, look, just issue some warnings every now and then. Everything doesn't have to end with you trying to send people or arrest people and write them tickets and send them to jail. You can actually handle things with a little more discretion. So it almost sounds like he was just kind of a prototypical overzealous cop. He's young. He's 25 years old. Maybe he was a little excited about having the power. I've seen that. I've seen guys who seem like they just have a thirst for the power of the badge, and they seem to be the least fit to even have a badge. And it seems that the system does kind of have some safeguards in place to do some mental assessments to make sure you're not in that category. But did you see that a lot? Just cops that seem to not understand the responsibility that comes with the power that they have, that they're just so excited to be powerful that they were sort of abusing everybody with it?
It depends on the quality of the applicant that got hired for the job. If this guy came from a Kroger's supermarket aisle where he was bagging groceries one week and then he was handed a gun and a badge the next week, you're gonna get what you get from that type of hire, you know. So I'm not sure what his background was. I have encountered some unbelievably some people that have poor judgment, and power can corrupt. And if you have someone that is of a weak mind, someone that maybe doesn't understand themselves and thinks that the uniform, the badge, and the gun are now their identity, those folks are going to be very dangerous individuals in that type of position.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think that I don't know. I guess I definitely asked you that question in a loaded kind of way, in the sense that I've seen that. I've seen guys that where I knew them growing up, and they really wanted to be cops, and a couple of these guys I remember thinking, if anybody ever gives you a badge and a gun, you're going to become a terrorist. This is going to be bad for everybody, bad for the world, bad for your relationships. I mean, you've seen cases where, where you have some, and again, not all. There are a lot of good cops out there. We know that goes unsaid. But you have some guys that have even used the power of their badge to terrorize, the women that they're in relationships with. You've seen cops get away with abuse and even murder. And so again, I don't think this guy's in that category, but it almost sounds like he was just so gung ho about doing his job that he didn't understand that with that power does come responsibility. And it's interesting because I can't say that in my 40s that I would use the power I have now in my own life the same way I would have used it in my 20s, right? When you're older and you have power, you understand that you still have to pick your battles wisely and intelligently, because those people that have given you that authority can easily take it away. It can easily backfire on you. So the best approach is to work with the people that you're supposed to have this authority over in a way that works for everyone. But when you're young, maybe you just assume, if you're a judge in the courtroom, maybe you think, I'm the judge, I can do what I want. Or if you're a professor, I'm the teacher, I can do what I want. Or I'm the officer, I can do what I want. And no one's in that position. Even President Obama, as powerful as he is, still has to work with the people that gave him that authority and be respectful in the process. And I think that just takes maturity to get to that point. And I was absolutely stunned when I saw this guy was only 25 years old, because that right there answered about 30% of the questions I had in terms of why he did what he did. Not to say that a 25-year-old cop can't do a good job, but a 25-year-old cop is more likely to make this kind of horrible mistake. I guess he's resigned. Maybe he can go work at Walmart or something. Maybe that's where he belongs. He can get angry behind the Walmart counter and throw things at the shelves. Thank you, man. I appreciate your insight. Did you have any more thoughts? I'll let you get the last thought here before we go.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I mean, it's a shame that in Professor Orr's situation, she's a college professor, and despite the fact that she is a professor, she still got railroaded by the system here. And if we have people with less means than the professor that are interacting with law enforcement, they're black, and they get into a situation where Professor Orr was trying to protect her future when she felt that she needed to plead guilty to a charge of a false arrest. How many other citizens out there that have less than Professor Orr going on for themselves are forced into those same sort of situations?
Well, we know that there are thousands. I mean, that's why the United States incarcerates more of its citizens than any country in the world, because we've got so many people in prison and in jail that should not be there. And that doesn't count all the people that are on probation, parole, and all these other things. And once they get caught up in the system, it's very difficult to get out. And if you are in the system, then the benefit of the doubt is almost always going to be swayed in the favor of the officer. So if something happens between you and a cop, on the side of a dark highway, and there are no cameras around, guess who society is going to believe? And that's a very dangerous slope that we live on in that regard, because unfortunately you have some cops that are every bit as corrupt, probably more corrupt than some of our worst criminals, and those people need to be weeded out, and we need to deal with that. But you're one of the good guys, and and you're a hero in this fight. So I want to say thank you very much, brother. I appreciate all your insights on this.
As always, Doctor, thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is Mr. Ken Williams. He's a 20-year veteran of the Brockton Police Department in Massachusetts. He's also a wrongful death investigator. You can look him up, and I encourage you to go find him and use his services. He's at kwillservices.com. Did I get it right?
That's right, sir.
kwillservices.com. That's KWILL services.com. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. And I'm going to say goodbye very slowly because I'm looking for my little button to hit so that I can shut this thing down. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.